if you were to project your organization or team forward 3 years, and at that moment, staffing was no longer an issue, what would you have done today that would have made that reality a possibility? And your answer cannot be only this: well, we were making more money and we were paying better. Because that's a lazy way out. I think it's for all of us. It's research doesn't support that answer. It's a variable that requires, when we talk about compensation, it's a variable that requires deeper thinking and things. So what are the things you would have emphasized today that would have given you the opportunity to say that 3 years from now? I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the Wild Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. And today we're wrapping up our series on staffing problems. Really a positive topic, right? Staffing problems. Let's go. And specifically, staffing for the long haul. So before we go any further, I would love for you to answer. I'm going to have you write. So get a pad out, whatever you document on, get that thing out. I don't care if it's old school or new school, but get a pad out. Because I'm going to have you take a couple of scores right now. Okay. I'd love for you to answer these following questions on a scale from 1 to 10. A 1 being like, not at all, not even close. And a 10 being like, oh, so much so, because it's going to be a bunch of to what extent questions. Okay. So a 10 is like, you're off the charts on this. The first question is this: to what extent is there a purposeful mission in your organization that you are going after? To what extent is there a purposeful mission in your organization that you're going after? Just from your gut. Don't overthink it. Scale from 1 to 10. All right. Give me it's just like that works. All right. Next question. To what extent is there a clear and identifiable strategy for achieving your organization's mission? Scale from 1 to 10. 1, like, could not be less clear. Oh, a 10 being like, oh, we have a strategy. We know exactly how we're going to go about it. Okay. Next question. To what extent do people in your organization love the work they get to do? To what extent do people in your organization love the work they get to do? From 1 to 10. Next question. To what extent are people clear about the job they're here to do in your organization and how it impacts the organization? It's kind of twofold. To what extent are people clear about the job they're here to do in your organization and how their job impacts the organization on a scale from 1 to 10? Go with your gut. Next question. To what extent are you hiring people who are ready to learn and grow? Some of your eyes are like jiggling in your head right now as you think about this. To what extent are you hiring people who are ready to learn and grow? There's more. To what extent are people in your organization performing at an excellent level? Getting it done. All right. Scale from 1 to 10. From your gut. 2 more questions. To what extent are the people in your organization invited to continuously develop and improve? To what extent are people in your organization invited to continuously develop and improve? And then the last question. To what extent are the leaders in your organization being invited to develop as leaders? To what extent are the leaders in your organization being invited to develop as leaders? So we're going to come back to these questions, but just hold on to your scores for a minute. This last week, I got to tell you, I've been positively haunted by a question that I heard earlier in the week. What would change today, Rob, if you paid attention to the things that will last? What would change today, Rob, if you paid attention to the things that will last? Like the things that will really last. And it begs a big question, right? What does it mean for something to last? What are the things that the long haul is about? When I coach basketball, I coached my kids' basketball teams for years, soccer teams also, but I coached basketball for years, and I would bring this shirt that said on the front of it, UK 2K. I'd bring this to the first practice every year. And I would tell my players the story that UK 2K is about. This is what it's about. The University of Kentucky. Some of you don't know this, but I lived in Kentucky, and we are big Kentucky basketball fans in my family. And what I told my teams was that they were the first team in history to reach 2,000 wins. And I would tell my players, and so that's what UK 2K, you get it? That's what it means. And so I tell this story. I said, do you know how they achieved 2,000 wins? And I told them it was three things. It was three things. And these are the three things. I told them it was conviction, connection, and competence. So I would tell them conviction meant that every time that they showed up on the basketball court, they showed up like they meant it. I told them that connection was about their understanding that it wasn't all about them, and it was the connection between players and the way that they passed the ball and the way that they played together that brought about those wins. And that competence was working at it every single day that they're on the court to get better at the skills that are necessary to actually play the game of basketball well. And I got to tell you, okay, some of you are going to know that I elaborated a little, or I kind of indulged the story just a bit, because there were a bunch of different coaches. And did all three coaches say those three things? Of course not. But I just went with the lie. Okay. So it was, you can blame me for that later, but I just went with it. I was like, because on some level, I knew that there probably was a little bit of truth in what I was describing. But I knew my hope at the time when these kids were young was that I might be impacting them for the long haul. And my sons who were on most of those teams knew that, like, this is what my dad does. It's like, this is his work with leaders. So I know what he's doing. They probably were thinking some of that, but that our team was going to be about more than that. My little lie, my little story that I kind of went a little further with. That was a vision I was trying to give them that connected many things together, including the culture we were creating as a team, our goal of playing our best, our structure at practices. Because if you were to ask me, like, what made those teams work well, I brought a plan for practice. You know what I mean? Like, I brought a plan every time. It was a lot of work, but it was so much fun at the time. I brought a strategy for getting it done, that our leadership, my leadership, and that leading a team like that is actually difficult. The reality is, like, a lot of times you have a co-coach that you don't always get along with, who's another parent. I'm just saying, it's just the reality, right? That, like, there's a lot of things going on when you coach a team. And that's where the fun began. But I always had kids who seemed less than motivated to be there, always. And in many ways, I was staffing for the long haul. I hope the connective tissue is there, y'all. So it was like I was staffing for the long haul because I knew it was highly likely that I would coach those boys and girls for a long time. And last summer, one of those players, frankly, at times, one of the players who was a little less than motivated, I saw him at a barbecue, and he's now a junior in college. And I didn't know if he was even paying attention. And he came up to me and he told me this. He said, "Rob, I will never forget those three C words you talked about." And I was like, "What are they?" And he said, "Conviction, connection, and competence." And I was blown away. I didn't know he was listening, but I hoped he was. And that he might remember some of those principles when not only he applies for his next job, but when he gets it and when he starts to serve others around him, it's stuck. I hope it continues to stick wherever he may lead next or serve next. And to think about staffing for the long haul, to think about our capacity to think longer term from a whole organizational perspective about staffing, is to remove ourselves for just a moment from the pressure we feel to effectively have the people we need and say, what is this really about? Because so often the staffing problem is an urgency in the moment, where if we could take a moment to step back for the long haul and say, what are we actually trying? What is this about? So staffing, it's interesting, is defined as one of the essential functions of management that's concerned with acquiring, hiring, developing, motivating, and retaining the best talent for achieving the goals of the organization. And my only hot button in that definition, there's a couple of them actually, is first of all, the word acquiring. Do we really acquire people? It's like when my sons talk about the British Premier League. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Like, in the British Premier League, in that European soccer league, they don't talk about like signing players. They literally say buying players. And so I'm not saying I get it. These are, the players that are going to pay a lot of money to play, but I'm like, it's when we go down this path, it's interesting, right? And then the other word that kind of bothers me is the word talent. It's like it's used instead of people. And I'm less bothered by the dehumanization. Actually, I'm kind of bothered by that too, but more on the thing that it's missing the point. Because doing all those things, acquiring, hiring, developing, motivating, retaining, when it's a human being, we have to pay attention to that to understand what we're actually trying to do instead of treating it like it's gas in a car. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's different. That these are human beings. They're complex. We are complex beings. And I think if we pay attention to that, and I think most of what our field of industrial organizational psychology has been about is some of those things. Like, it's what does it mean to what's psychologically going on inside of a person? And it was interesting. I was asked yesterday on a podcast to indicate why, listen to this, why I would refer a client of ours at Wild Leaders to the organization that was hosting the podcast. And it was interesting because I didn't know I was going to get asked this question. And I said something to this effect. I said, because I know the people and leaders here. I know they're competent. I know they're sacrificial. And I trust them. And to be honest, they are people I would want to work with. If I were looking for a job, I would look into the possibility of being on their team. You hear what I'm saying? It's interesting to think about that. So if you were to look back years from now and be able to say we solved our staffing problems, what would you have done today? And I want to tell you some of the things that research supports and some really great thinkers might say. That's going to include several things because it's a complex answer. But I want to try to simplify that a little bit. And pay will never be enough. It matters, but it will never be enough. And competence will never be enough. Like getting really skilled people. Some of you know that, right? You hire a really competent saboteur into your business, and the 2 weeks it took to hire that competent person can take you 2 years to undo. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to label a person as good or bad, but like when we're in a moment where we're not developmentally ready, maybe we're not in the right fit in the organization. And by the way, there's a multi-cajillion-dollar industry called organizational development consulting that has fully been funded by the investment in the lie that it's all about money. You know what I mean? That we just miss it. So then we bring in consultants to try and solve where we missed it. It's not enough. It matters, but it's not enough. What does it take for your organization? This is what I want to inspire you into. What would it take for your organization to become a destination? A place where people want to work or where people would love to work. And one of the things before I get into this list that I would say is we don't arrive at this. We keep working at it. So if it sounds like I'm saying like, do these things and then you will have arrived and then you can let it go. Like, ridiculous, right? These are things we have to continue to pay attention to. And so here's a few of the things that if I were to put together all the things that I've tried to teach leaders in higher ed, in just in real business context over the years, if you took all of what we know, what would be some of the things? And frankly, those things are the questions I asked you at the beginning. So I want to give you the questions again, but I want to unpack them before we finish. And then let's continue this conversation throughout our week, maybe our month. These will be great things for you to talk about with your team. So the first thing, to what extent is there a purposeful mission in your organization that you're going after? Mission. That's what that question's about. A purposeful mission that is not only a performance goal, but a goal for how we're going to serve. A reason that goal exists, that mission exists. That's clear, that's definable. Like we know, we've thought about why we are in this. I can't tell you how many CEOs I've worked with in fairly financially successful businesses who, when I ask them like, so what's the goal? And it's like, well, to 3x our business this year. Are any of us compelled by 3xing the business? Now, some of us might be, if it's all about the finances or we need the finances, but are our people going to be compelled by that? I don't know why I went into that falsetto just there. It's kind of a way of emphasizing things. Yeah, borrow that all you want. So the next thing, strategy. To what extent, I asked you, to what extent is there a clear and identifiable strategy for achieving your organization's mission? What I mean is, have we defined our unique way we do our thing, our business? When I say business, I don't just mean like for profits. The way we do our business that will allow us to fulfill that mission. What is the strategy for fulfilling the mission that is unique to you? It probably includes what kinds of people you have, what skill sets you have, what's the unique product you bring, how is it marketed specific to you? The next one was culture. That next question, you know what the culture question? I narrowed all of the culture literature into one question. To what extent do people in your organization love the work they get to do? All of these, by the way, I could give you, like, Dr. Halleck and I could do like a cajillion, I don't know why cajillion comes up again, like a 12-point lecture series on the actual specifics in this. And we do a lot of work on this, but I'm just hitting the points here. Culture, where the stated values and the assumptions are healthy, people thrive relationally and personally, where people are honest and hard conversations are not avoided. Like it's like things that where this is a great place to work. Doesn't mean we're happy every day, but it means over the long haul, this is a place where we're dealing with the tough stuff, but we're engaged and we're real with one another. And we're getting it done. Structure. The next question was around structure. To what extent are people clear about the job they are here to do and how it impacts the organization? There's a whole lot I could get into this that we talked about in other parts of the series. If you want to go back and check it out, there was a thing called the job characteristics model that's all about providing structure for jobs. We could get into job design. Do we understand the roles we're trying to fill? But at the most fundamental level, and all those things are important. Again, another 15-point series. But at the fundamental level, people are clear about the job they're here to do and how it impacts the organization. So they have that thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago on line of sight. Do I know how the work I do impacts the rest of the organization? The next one, to what extent are you hiring people who are ready to learn and grow? It's a selection question. It's fundamentally about, it's inviting us into the possibility that it's more than just about competence and fit. Are we being intentional about selecting highly competent people who are editable? They're in a season where they're willing to change, they're willing to grow, and they're willing to learn, not just for their own sake, for the sake of others. Performance. To what extent are people in your organization performing at an excellent level? They're getting it done. Execution is clear, and people are getting feedback on how to get better at their performance. I love this. You know, the Wild Leaders, people at Wild Leaders, like, we love to get it done. It's awesome when you put all the other pieces together. People development. The next question was, to what extent are the people in your organization invited to continuously develop and improve? It's all about people development. Like, development is an ongoing investment in the people. Conversations that matter through scaffolding that helps have that conversation is what Wild Leaders business model is about. And then finally, leader development. To what extent are the leaders in your organization being invited to develop as leaders? And are we providing them a structure for development that breathes? You all know that I believe in it, not just because we created and provide the Wild Toolkit to the organizations that we serve, but because it works. You know, creating a regular cadence of development that blends and intersects my performance on the job with where I'm going as a human being begins to change all kinds of things that we could share with you about the impact of that kind of thing. But our leaders being invited into that development process, getting feedback, our managers having conversations with people about things that matter to them that also intersect with the effectiveness they're pursuing. And now that so that's a lot of questions, but I went through them twice, I know, but I was just trying to explain that a bit more. Now that you've had a chance to assess where you're going in your staffing efforts for the long haul, let's get this conversation going. Let's keep it going.